The following podcast, I sat down with Divi Bogart, who is a Yale-trained psychiatric nurse practitioner who has dealt with so many people struggling with so many issues. I have so many questions about psychotropic medication and their use and their purpose, and we got to discuss all of that. She specializes in eating disorders, and talking to her was like talking to someone who was so humble and so much respected and loves people that it was really a pleasure to get her perspective. And we talked about many, many topics, including psychedelics and other topics. So I hope you enjoy. It was awesome. Remember to subscribe, like, follow, click all the buttons, whatever you're supposed to do. It really, really helps with the algorithm. Write all the comments you have. And I'm enjoying all the feedback I've gotten so far from all these podcasts. Hope you enjoyed as much as I did.
Hello and welcome to the Brainstorm podcast. And now, your host, Sonny Perlman.
We're live. I want to tell him to look for the second one. Okay, Divi.
Hey.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay,
good to be
psychedelics suck. Let's talk about why. No, I'm kidding.
It's one tool in the toolkit. It's part of this collective journey we're on to discover how to hold the suffering of the human experience. So when people reach out about psychedelics this, psychedelics that, it's almost like an insult to the work we do.
Right.
It's not about the psychedelics. It's about the discovery of all things that can help us aid people in their own unique journeys through psychological suffering to some personal liberation.
Right. So I think the reason I keep going into these fights, this is like psychedelic is such a fascinating thing for me because it's one of the things that has really shifted my life.
Okay.
It's made a huge difference in my life. Or at least was the impetus of great change in my life. I don't know if it was the great change, but it was definitely a big thing. And I find myself arguing with people about it, against it, and pro it. I feel like I'm always in an argument about psychedelics.
It's
right?
a heated subject.
It's a heated subject. Now, I'm not sure why it's so heated. I find actually the subject I want to talk to you about a little bit more, which is psychotropic medication, is to me that should be heated. We should be yelling and screaming about that one.
Let's go for it.
Right.
Raw
So psychedelics,
psychiatry.
I'm like, worst could happen. The worst thing could happen is it wasn't great. Like that's what, like it's generally not a horror story in your life.
And you're also not expected to be on it for, let's say, decades or for life.
Right.
Told, take this thing a day in, day out for years, for decades, like
Right.
with medications.
I think the thing that really drives me crazy, and it drives me crazy all the time, is that how quickly people jump into like, this is the next answer. I think we are like deeply trained in our nervous system to believe that something is going to save us always.
Don't you feel like that's essentially a trauma response?
I can't think it is, because I think everybody is doing it always. So if it is, then how is it so deeply in everybody's human nature?
Or maybe it's almost like a child consciousness. You're like, where's my mother?
Right.
You're like, where's the Mashiach, right? Where's the salvation? We're in a sense, are we wired inherently to think like that? Is that something that happens to us over time?
I mean, I think it's wired inherently. I do. And I think what you're saying about where is my mother, I think it's human nature. I think you go to every single culture and you're going to find that everybody is looking for something that's going to save them. Mm-hmm. Every religion is based on something that's going to save you. Even like religions that don't believe in God, believe that you're going to reincarnate. So there's something afterwards. Like there's a reason for this, because
it's almost like the big illusion, in the sense that it's real. Something is going to save you, but maybe we're pointed in the wrong direction, meaning it's something inside of yourself or something that's coming through you and not something outside of yourself. I know you talk a lot, do a lot of work with addiction, and I feel like addiction is almost like it's such a relatable and heartbreaking state because you're looking for that solution, you're looking for that relief. It's just that nothing feels as good as your own medicine. Like you're going to find it outside of yourself in a drug, in a guru, in a book, in a medication. But that's in a food, in a relationship. But that thing you're going to find outside of yourself is never going to taste or feel as good as the medicine of your own purpose in this world.
Right. I say it not the same way, but I never really heard it that way. I really like the way you're saying it. Because one of the things that I'm always arguing is that addiction is not insanity. You know, they have like the idea of like addiction is insanity because we are constantly doing the same thing, expecting different results.
Uh-huh.
And what I see as addiction is I need to feel connected and I need to feel special. And I need to feel one with the universe, with the people around me. I need that. I can't do it from myself, like with my own medicine. I can't do that internally. So I'm figuring out a way to do it externally.
Right.
And so it's not insanity. And I think the response to that, the healing of that is, okay, exactly what you want is what you need. You're going to get that connection. You're going to get the realness of that. It doesn't have to come from something superficial. It comes from people and connections and from building your own self-esteem and feeling good from the inside out. You're not going to need all this external stuff. So it's not that we're giving you a different answer. We're giving you the same thing in the right way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what you're saying.
Yeah. Essentially, that human drive for that salvation is not, the drive is pure.
Right.
It's like we deserve salvation.
Right.
Like the pain we're feeling is real. The relief we seek, we deserve that. It's just, we do ourselves a disservice by looking in, so to speak, not even the wrong places, just the places that aren't the most nourishing.
Right.
What's your version of the opposite of connection isn't sobriety? It's blank.
The opposite of connection.
The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. It's
connection. That's what they say.
Right.
I mean, that's that awesome video that finally I'm yapping about this stuff for years, and finally this video comes out, and I'm like, thank God.
I was just inviting us to put in other words into that blank, meaning the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. It's blank.
Do you think connection's not a good thing to put in there?
I think connection is great. It's just, again, also in some sense implying that you need something that you don't yet have. You need to find the right community. You need to find the right rebbe. You need to find the right friend. You need to find the right therapist. And all of these things may be true. And also, maybe the opposite is, in a sense, being regulated, like regulation, or a state that is essentially a human state of calm and coherence and feeling safe in the physical body.
Well, I think that comes after connection. Meaning, I think the worst torture you could do to a human being is put him into solitary confinement. Like, he could be the most connected, evolved person, and you put him in there long enough, and it will just leak away. It will go away. So you could be, I mean, maybe there's one or two people in the world that can handle it, but generally, we need that connection to get to the next step.
Okay, so I want to get with you to psychiatry and medications, because that is really important. And also, I'm also thinking of this young girl I attempted to treat years ago in a residential treatment center for adolescents.
Okay.
She was this beautiful girl, intelligent girl, and sure, I was prescribing a couple medications for her at the time. We also formed some sort of relationship. Unfortunately, after she left the program, I heard that shortly after she had passed, she had taken her life.
Oh, okay.
And when I found out, I was surprised. And I didn't necessarily see it coming for her, a young girl. And one thing that she shared with me in our time together, I always remembered it. And she was describing her distress, and she described it as, there are all these people around me, but they're like shadows watching me drown.
Okay.
Which was essentially her way of saying none of you are actually getting it.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the idea of like being alone in a crowd.
Yeah.
Like we're just, and I think that we all feel that sometimes. But I think the point is that she didn't feel like those were the people that make her safe. I mean, they were just there, but they weren't doing what they were supposed to do, which was hold her.
Right.
And she wasn't feeling held. What I'm saying is that I don't think that having the connection fixes addiction. I think it's the beginning of healing, meaning it's you need it. That's interesting. The way I see the work that we do, because we're running our village, and we have the idea of it is that we are like literally surrounding people with this incredibly beautiful new family, and like re-raising you within this healthy environment of this community. And I don't say that that's the answer. I just think that that is the vessel that you could get your answers. That is where we could hold you.
That's like the best word ever.
What?
Vessel.
The vessel.
Yeah, that's actually what I call my practice, my private practice. And it's because we have all of this potential and all of this material and all of this light. And if the person doesn't have the vessels to actually hold it and drink from their own fuel, they end up like that girl. Like, it's all around me, but I'm not actually feeling it. I'm not actually feeling seen, safe, heard, and understood. So maybe in some ways the opposite of addiction is this nourishment we're talking about.
Yeah.
Which connection is a very important form of human nourishment. And also, in order for the person to feel nourished by connection with other humans, they also have to feel safe in their physical body. And they also have to feel a sense of trust in those relationships.
How do we feel safe in our body?
Uh-huh.
That's really, it's a fascinating thing, because I got in this field and I got the regular training, and I was very psychodynamic oriented, and I was like really deeply understanding. And then after a bunch of years, and it really was a bunch of years, because I'm a curious person, and I'm also a frustrated person if things aren't working, and things weren't working. And my question became, like everything seems to be about the self-esteem. Like if I feel all right, self-esteem is about worthiness and competence. Like if I feel all right and I could do it, then I could live this world. And I'm like, everything is about the self-esteem. Like at the end of the day, all we're trying to do here is have everybody have self-esteem, esteem for themselves. They feel all right, and they can do it. And they could go out there and do the world. And so we're all doing that. So then I started asking, literally one after the next, like mentors of mine and professors, just saying, how do we fix someone's self-esteem? Just that question. I mean, I'm talking to the greatest
Give them a
psychologists.
prescription pad and make them a doctor.
Exactly. Give them, like I had my brother Kiwi on. He said like his self-esteem was struggling. He went and became a doctor. Like that was.
But the danger when people do that is you end up with what we see in psychiatry sometimes, where you run into scenarios where the provider went into a field of helping others because they themselves are lonely. Very, very often. Yeah.
But my question was I felt like it was a dumb question that no one was answering. And I was saying, okay, look, the self-esteem's broken. We're all agreeing. This guy does not have a self-esteem, or it's a very weak self-esteem. It's not doing it. So, okay, how do we fix it? I literally never got answers.
Did it take you to bring you to attachment theory?
It did bring me to attachment theory, but
because it's like when you are with your baby or little child, and their presence lights you up. You just want to eat them. You just think they're amazing. They're just precious.
Right.
It's like that is true confidence.
Well, and then ultimately, according to attachment theory, which I'm a big chassid, that internalizes and they buy that. We tell them, you're amazing. And then they say, oh, I'm amazing. And then they carry that around with them.
Right.
But now you got a broken self-esteem.
So they missed the first round.
Maybe. So that was the thing, is that I found some people missed it, and that's the worst type. And some people, they had it, But trauma came around
And
and ruined it.
Yeah.
So trauma tells us, I'm not worthy.
Uh-huh.
Everything's saying you're worthy, but then trauma says, no, you're not. We could treat you the way we want to treat you. We could do whatever we want to you. No one's going to save you. There's nothing coming. I'm not worthy. So now all that worthiness is gone. So now you're dealing with somebody who may have had a self-esteem in the first place, and now it's gone. And we find that so many parents have come to me like, I don't know, 8 years old, just kid was delicious, fell apart. Like, what happened?
Yeah.
No self-esteem. They're feeling everything. Like the world is crushing them at all times. What happened? Trauma, like we've seen, is killing people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's now? So now so now it's broken. Now how do I build it again?
Okay, can we back up for a second?
Yeah.
I just I'm also thinking about
We went in pretty fast.
Yeah, the word trauma, and people almost today have a reaction to like the word psychedelics. Like, I've heard that word so many times in the past year. So just for myself, we're talking about these actual wounds, right? We're talking about actual wounds. Like if someone has a visible wound, everybody gets on the boat of compassion pretty quickly.
Right.
Oh, how can I support you? Can I get you a Band-Aid? But if the wound is invisible, people can get kind of confused. Right. And then they start to treat the person, like your example of someone in Shiva, and you're saying, go get back to work.
Right.
Because they don't see that the person is actually grieving because it's less visible. So let's say some people we don't fully understand where people come from and how they evolve. Like we don't start as people, right? We start preconception. So someone who's a very sensitive soul, it's the trauma that rips their sense of centeredness in the world and it has everything turn upside down for them, where they go from a sense of confidence in themselves to a sense of shame in themselves, could be a much subtler trauma than somebody else who has a more robust disposition, and it takes a much bigger wound to really break them.
Right.
So I just want to acknowledge that, because I feel like in our community, there are people who say, well, why am I so dysfunctional? My trauma wasn't so bad. And it's like, it's not about necessarily how severe the event was. It's more about this interaction between your sensitivity and your experience.
Right.
And I think those sensitive people, they're not even fragile. They're actually some of the most powerful people. It's just they're highly sensitive.
Well, I think that sensitivity also comes with a thought. And the thought is, the world should be fair. I mean, there's a spiritual idea that the world is perfect. And I believe that a sensitive person, I myself as a sensitive person, although I've built a lot of layers on top, but as a child, I was a very sensitive person. It's a belief, and I think it's the most spiritual belief, that the world is perfect. And with things going wrong, doesn't make sense.
Right. So
it doesn't make any sense. So it's a very spiritual, like spiritual and sensitive go very hand in hand with me, because I believe that the world is supposed to be perfect. And the thought of addicts that are mostly the most sensitive people I've ever met is, it's not fair. Like when a kid says, it's not fair, and you're like, the world's not supposed to be fair. You're wrong. The world is supposed to be fair.
Right.
We just don't see it. But if we believe that everything is for a reason, then the world is perfectly fair. And if a kid's not seeing it,
right,
it's bothersome. So I'm saying the sensitive child are the ones that change the world. I mean, when we think about all the world changers, and I think this is why we need sensitive people, they're all the people that go, everybody sees, oh, there's a problem with the education system, but only one person's going to like, it's not fair. It has to change. And everybody else is like, no, well, the education system, no. What I'm trying to say is that the world is created with these people so that they can make change. The problem is that they're about to get hit with a hurricane.
I think you just touched on a definition of psychedelic. If we move away from the substances for a moment, the word means to reveal the mind, but clearly it's to reveal a part of the mind that is not necessarily revealed at all times, which is this state of consciousness where everything is perfect, in a sense, where all of the suffering has a purpose, where every small thing that happens, like the Baal Shem Tov says, the leaf that falls is there to protect an insect, or it's there for a certain purpose. That this part of the maybe reason why psychedelics have become such a big part of the conversation is because there is a very important truth that those experiences can open you up to. And that truth is something everybody deserves to have, which is that this is the divine plan. We're in it right now. This is exactly how it's supposed to be playing out. And the mental health challenges that are cluttering people's capacity to actually feel that, they deserve freedom from that. So you were reframing the addict as they're not looking for the wrong thing. They're actually looking for something we all deserve, right? And B, they are not just stomping their feet like children saying it's not fear, but actually they're tapped into a spiritual truth that it is perfect, or it is meant to be perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
It's almost frustratingly childish. When we look at it from the outside, we're like, stop saying that. Stop. Just admit that the world is terrible. And just admit it already. And it's frustrating. And we're like, and they're frustrated. The world just is not doing it. The psychedelics, I've heard a couple of different explanations that were similar to what you're saying, which one was, it takes your walls down. All the walls come down so you could see what's real. Also, the removing the veil, there's a veil, we see the world the way we think it's true.
Right.
And psychedelics goes, hey, this last time I did the psychedelic trip, I think you were there. I believe you were there.
Good to meet you again.
Yeah, good to meet you again. I didn't remember you there till later, but I think we once. There was a point where besides for destroying me and being horrible to me, because he's very, very mean grandmother, very, very mean. I'm getting a big potch, but
just cleaning out your psychic sewage system.
Right. But there was at the end an idea that I don't know, it's perfect.
It's perfect.
It's perfect. I breathed for the first time in my life at the end of it. That's what it felt like. I had a birthing breathe, and it was like the breath had nothing in it that was wrong. Everything
baggage.
was just right. The world is perfect, and we just don't see it. And there's, the marshal that I've used the most was Har Sinai. We get in the Torah, Har Sinai, and they were fully tapped in, talking. There was no veil. There was a conversation directly between God and us, and we're having this conversation. There's no veil, and they fully got it. Everything is perfect. And then this is
they
where
hopped
until
they forgot. It didn't take very long.
Very quick.
Yes.
So that's where when I actually brings me back to what I was saying in the beginning, is that I'm always getting into arguments about it, and it's the same problem. The same problem is everybody keeps grabbing the next new thing as the answer, when the answer is us. It's the work we have to do to keep growing. There is a vessel we have to be in to get there.
Well, it's so simple that people, it's like when it's so simple and you've been working so hard to solve a problem and the solution is so simple, you're like, it's embarrassing that I was doing this much work to figure something so simple out. Right?
What do you mean?
Meaning it's hard. If we come back and we say, wow, the solution is right here, we are it. It's like, but I've been trying to heal for 10, 15 years, so it must be more complicated than that. Meaning, if you go to a psychoanalyst and they analyze you 3 times a week, that feels more like it fits the suffering, right? I've suffered so much, this concept, my parents and generations before, we've suffered so much, I can't just remove the yoke and be unburdened, right? The suffering has to be worth it. So I feel like we have a lot of attachment to the solution has to be complicated, because our lives are complicated. Right. But just because a problem is complicated doesn't mean that the most effective solution is a complicated one. And also, I think that people gravitate toward these types of experiences, like intense experiences, including psychedelic experiences, because they come with the romance and the fun and the novelty of an intense experience. And then when that wears off, the healing gets very unglamorous. It's you sitting with your own SHIT and breathing through it for minutes, for hours, with nobody patting you on the back and telling you you're doing a great job. It's not to be callous, but it's like you taking yourself to the bathroom, right? And that's not attractive to people. So I find often when people come for help, it's like they're excited about the session they're going to have with the practitioner, because that's kind of fun. You're meeting somebody new and you get to share about yourself and you get a new perspective. They're not excited about the work they're going to have to do to live inside of their skin for the next week or but that's the work that actually counts.
Right.
So it's like simple, and it's also, it hurts. It's painful to sit with your demons and whip them into shape, right? And become, actually exercise agency in your own system. Like, let's say you have a tendency toward an obsessional loop. It's not enjoyable to sit there and exercise your agency and say, every time this obsessional loop visits, I'm going to calmly say hello to it and let it know who's boss here. Right. And take my brain in a new direction. And actually, that is not, no, it's like, it's not, that's work. That's like taking yourself to your mental gym.
Right.
It's hard. It's like, another metaphor is like, you're given this mind-body situation, this human being, and people are like, okay, let's say we look at the person as kind of like a guitar or some complex instrument. And people come to the mental health professional and they're like, why is it not making music? Right? Like, why is it making these ugly sounds? Right. And the mental health professional is like, hey, I can hold space for you and exercise compassion and give you some tips and skills. You're the one who has to go. You ever tried to learn to play guitar?
Yeah.
You know, like for the first year, you're just like building finger strength and getting the clumsy chord shapes. It's like years before you're actually moving around the thing, let alone across the whole fret.
Right.
You can hire a guitar teacher and they can show you a few tips, but you're the one who has to sit yourself on your tuchus and repeat, right?
Right.
So it's like that with our mental hygiene or whatever we want to call it. It's kind of a sweat, rinse, repeat situation, and nothing is going to absolve us of that.
Right. Well, I think also the other thing that I really like the way you put that. I'll just say that. Just take a moment. I think that I found, so I've kind of gone into the industry of what I call level one, which is there's a lot of work to do. We can't do it unless we're in the vessel. Meaning like that part. So like, again, this Harsinai mushal. Okay. The next part is then we fail, we fall, you know, which is and it has to happen. Like we have to hit the top of the mountain, then we have to fall and serve the idol. But then the next part is, okay, you serve the idol. Now let's do it for real. Now you saw that you're still human, you're still doing, you know, like you didn't get cured, but you saw the answer. Now it's 40 years of being held with the cloud, being shown the way with the light. That's the 40 years. To me, that's the work. But it only works if you're being surrounded by your community, by your people, by your leaders, by the one who's going to show you the way. I also am fascinated by this tree fell over. Okay. So this tree fell over my lawn, and I was just looking at it and realizing something really fascinating. It didn't have too many deep roots. It all was very shallow. I don't know if you've seen it. It's like it's spread out really far, and a couple of deep roots. But it's like, and then I saw someone sent me this whole video on it because I was mentioning it, and it was fascinating. I should link the video if I find it. But it was this whole thing that we need to spread out. So what we're thinking a lot is I need a lot of deep, meaningful relationships. But the vessel is you just have to be held from every direction. And the trees are so spread out, these roots are so spread out, and they're shallow. They're not deep relationships. It's just enough people loving you gives us the strength to do it. And then we have a couple of deep ones that go deep into the ground and you get nourishment. But you even attach to other networks. They even, like the root systems, attach to other networks and get help from other networks. That's how these shallow, big roots. So what I'm saying is that the work has to be done by ourselves, and that's the independent part of our life, which I call this level 2. The level 1 is kind of skipped over because we go to rehab or we go to psychedelics and we get the boom blast off. But then we know we got to do the work, but without the people around us, I think the work doesn't work either. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
It's like a fish out of water. Like in David Foster Wallace's speech, he's like, the 2 fish are swimming along and one fish says to the other, hey, how's the water? And the other fish goes, what's water?
Right.
Meaning it's not about you have just like a husband or a wife. It's like you have this water you're swimming in that is connection.
Right.
And you're at a point where you're not even thinking about it because it's just the water you're swimming in. And
have you ever spoken to people that don't know that have strong connections?
That do have strong connections?
It's annoying. They can't get people without it.
Right.
I mean, they're like, I don't understand why.
Because they're like, what's water?
Right.
They're just swimming in it.
They're saying, what's water? And they're like, I just had a conversation with somebody and he was looking at me like, what's with all this addiction and this? And
Get it together, people.
Yeah, like, what are you talking about? It's so like what you use drugs, you like it so much, you keep doing it, you can't stop it. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, you don't even know what disconnection feels like because thank God, like in the past I would get angry, but now I'm like, he's saying, what's water? Like, what are you talking about? Of course, yeah, I like drugs, but I'm not going to do it 10 times, ruin my life. I'll do something bad for once and then move on with my life. They don't have a concept of like, oh my gosh, there's a connection that I could grab onto and hold on to forever. That's what.
And I'm not letting go. Also with, I guess, because I'm thinking more from the angle of psychiatric conditions, someone who has, let's say, ruminative OCD, right? They're obsessing. It's like, we don't know why they're holding.
Is that what they call the pure
O, something like that. Yeah. You know, we don't know as a person who's not living inside their skin why they're holding on that hard to this one loop. But let's just say there's a good reason for it. And this is where real empathy comes in. It requires you to shed all of your conceptions about the world and take a moment inside of another person's skull or heart and imagine all your walls came down. Imagine you didn't have a home to sleep in. It's like, yeah, you would become dysregulated. And until you're actually standing in that place, it's hard to imagine. And this is a challenge, let's say as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, I think people like who prescribe medications are faced with, where you may have someone coming in who's actually in your level 1. They don't have the network of roots.
Right.
They're clearly suffering. They're telling you they're uncomfortable. And they're coming to you with some hope that you can prescribe medications to help them. And it puts you in an ethical quandary because it's like, how do you explain to this person that what the medications can do and what they cannot do? Like, how do you give them hope and not turn them away, but also help them understand that no medication can replace the water? You can't take a isolated, alienated person who doesn't trust any human beings and give them an antidepressant. I mean, you can give them an antidepressant, right, but it's not going to soothe their wounded soul. It's not going to give them water to swim in. So people talk about informed consent with psychiatric medications, and it's like, go explain that to someone.
Right.
Right? They're coming to you and you're like, you're hope for them. You don't want to turn them away.
Right.
They're asking you for food, then they're looking at the medication as like water. You want to give it to them.
Right.
You also don't want to give them false promises because you want to respect their humanity and you want to help lead them in the actual direction of healing. So I think that's where integrative psychiatry comes in, which is a form of psychiatry where the practitioners just remain humble about all of this.
Wait, hold on. I've never met a psychiatrist that was humble. Talk to me about this. What does this mean?
Well, that's why I'm not a psychiatrist. That's why I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner, because as a nurse practitioner, you start off your training at the bedside.
Right.
changing catheters and wiping people down and spending 12 hours at taking care of their body.
Right.
And when I was getting curious about how to help people through the human experience, that resonated with me, meaning I wanted to be able to use tools, real tools. At the time, I was skeptical of psychotherapy. So I thought, oh, medicines, that seems real. And I also resonated with starting at the bedside of the human body and working your way into the psyche, which we think of as the mind, but maybe etymologically is actually the soul.
Could you explain that a little bit more?
So psychiatrist, doctor of the soul. Psychotherapy, ministering to the soul. This is maybe a definition that's a little lost on most of us navigating Western medicine. And
Right.
It's what psychiatry, I like to believe, has its roots in. Ultimately, I had a mentor who trained in psychiatry before SSRIs were invented, before antidepressants were on the market. So what did they do? They ministered to the,
Yeah, what did they do?
They ministered to the internal world. They sought out to practice medicine of the mind. There are humble people in the field, and when you are tasked with 20 minutes after 20 minutes after 20 minutes treating people who are now identified by 3 letters in the DSM, MDD, GAD, MDD, it's easy to become demoralized yourself and to become, maybe arrogant, to fall back on a sense of arrogance. To remain humble in modern psychiatry is a tall order. Meaning I understand why people kind of just go into some sort of shell. But integrative psychiatry is essentially saying that there needs to be an integrative toolbox. And a lot of people are into this today. It can mean bringing spirituality back in. It can mean bringing lifestyle changes like diets back in. It can mean looking at the physiology of the patient, like exposures to toxins and genetic vulnerabilities that maybe can or cannot be tested, micronutrient deficiencies that can or cannot be tested. But it's essentially sitting with a person and saying, yeah, you're a mystery. Let's go on a journey of discovery together. We might not get it right, but we'll try.
Right.
And if you bring a medication into that, it's a whole different frame.
I had a really, you're talking about this. I had this really wild encounter. I've had other encounters similar, but this was like very shocking. Kind of. I went into a very, very well-known psychiatrist. I went with one of the clients. The reason I went.
How much did the psychiatrist charge?
Oh, a lot. So I went in
enough to make it worth it.
Enough to make him think it was worth it. So. And she's very well known, and everybody's very excited about her. And I went in with this guy, and I went in because I couldn't understand what was happening. Just getting meds, and just help me understand. I was running a sober house.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go see, what she has to say. And then I said, okay, so what's his diagnosis? And then she went through like all of them. Like she's like, okay, he's bipolar, he's depressed, he's anxious.
He's got it all.
Just went through all of them, and we're treating this with this and this with this. And this. I said, it seems like there's some speculation going on.
Mm-hmm.
Just
a
little bit,
yeah, just a sprinkle.
And she full out lost it at me, like yelling at me, like, how dare you question my experience? I've been doing this for, I don't know, a certain amount of years, and it was a lot of years, over 2 decades. And when I say it's this, like she just went at me, and I was like, how could she even possibly think that this is true? I don't know. I couldn't understand it because I'm not like that. I'm always questioning the journey and like trying to figure out. Like, I have some ideas of things to do, but I've never met 2 people that are the same. It really. It's a journey.
Or a human being who's static in that way. And you said you were originally trained in psychodynamic thought.
Yeah.
Psychodynamic is the psyche is dynamic.
Yeah.
It's moving around. So even if something is true today, we don't know what will remain true over time. So let's just say I could understand why an authoritative approach would be very soothing to someone at a certain state in their process where they're maybe in a more childlike, like they really need a parent to come tell them to go to bed or
Right.
to eat breakfast. So you come to a psychiatrist who says they know and they have an answer. It's very comforting and very soothing. The shadow side of that is you could get lost in that vortex and people could stay stuck in that for decades or more, where they're convinced that they are defective in a particular psychological or psychiatric way, when in fact the psyche can change over time. I mean, people come in for treatment in their 20s and the brain is still developing. And who's to say what will remain true in an individual psyche over the course of their lifespan? And of course, keeping the spiritual component in mind. I told you I was watching the Living Tyra video, and someone comes to the Lubavitch Rebbe saying that their daughter is struggling with anxiety and disordered eating and not leaving the house. And the Rebbe says, be more careful about the parents' observance of Taras HaMishpacha. The Rebbe is talking about how sometimes you have to remove spiritual blockages. And they say this situation improved. Meaning, how can you be so sure of something when you're dealing with a human being who's a composite of these different parts, their physiology, their spirituality, their soul, their psyche? The psyche itself carries so much multiplicity in it. So when you're sitting with someone, how do you even know what part of them you're sitting with? You know, like there's a particular part of people that brings themselves to a psychiatrist's office. It's different than the part that, let's say, if they work in a school and they are a teacher, they show up very differently to teach the class than they do when they visit their psychiatrist. Right? So the psychiatrist is seeing a snippet of this person's humanity. Right? How many very conclusive conclusions can you draw from that? So it's also maybe a personal style also of really being in the uncertainty of it all and finding that to be the mystery of psychiatry and finding that to be what's exciting about unraveling the tapestry of suffering. And that speaks to some people more than others.
Right. I definitely want to go more into psychiatry. You just reminded me of a story. My mother, who was a therapist, and we're all therapists, my whole family.
Yeah. Something happened.
I just did a podcast with my nephew who's becoming a therapist. I'm like, this is bad.
Intergenerational healing needs some work.
This is really bad.
This goes real deep.
I remember she told me something when I was really young, because she was like talking about a case and she got the case notes for the person.
Okay.
So the history. And she looked at the history and then she met the person and she said, it's crazy. Nowhere in these notes did it say that he's hilarious. This guy is really funny. Like they didn't write that he's funny anywhere in the notes.
Yeah.
Like you're missing a whole part of this human being, and you're saying like that's just one piece.
Yeah, because he may not feel comfortable to share that with you yet. Or right? So it's like you're only getting to see the parts of a person that they feel safe to reveal to you at any one time.
Right.
So I'm big into this parts thing right now in the sense that, okay, I have another story I want to share that you just reminded me of, but let's come back to psychedelics for a second. I just want to say that from a clinical perspective, what they have the potential to do is in a certain way to dissolve dissociation. And there's more to it. Right? Okay. So that's an oversimplification, right?
Yeah.
But let's just say there are parts of ourselves that we learn to hide. You talk about this in your other podcast with Ellie Nash. And like, as long as there's a part of yourself that if you would show it, you would be disowned, you don't really feel like you belong yet. So there are parts of ourselves that we learn to hide in different ways, different tactics of dissociation that we come up with. Some of those are so ingrained in our beings that we don't even know we're doing that.
Right.
So medicine that can powerfully dissolve dissociative barriers so you can see parts of yourself you haven't met yet has the power to be a catalyst in the right way in trauma work, because trauma work is going back and retrieving those exiled parts and becoming their parent again and giving them a new association, a new memory of safety so they can come back online. So
and psychedelics have the ability to do that?
To help dissolve dissociation when...
And you're saying dissociation has the things that are covered?
The walls, the veil you were talking about, meaning it's not just the veils between us and God. It's also the veils between us and parts of ourselves that we've long ago buried. So if the person themselves,
Which you could argue that's God. Okay, go on.
yes, same. All roads lead to home.
Right.
And if the person themselves has parts of themselves that they're not even safe with, how much more so when they come to a doctor's office where you're on guard? There are a lot of parts that don't come in the office. So that's where psychodynamic theory comes in. It's like, keep in mind the moving pieces here, some of which you haven't even met yet. And so you were saying so the story you reminded me of was this woman who was describing her stay in a psychiatric hospital. Okay. This is a very creative person, right? So they end up in a psychiatric hospital. They don't actually want to be there. Okay. And so they're there and they start decorating their room with beautiful artwork. They have these erasable markers and they're making gorgeous pictures everywhere on the wall. And every mental health professional who comes into the room doesn't say anything about the artwork all over the walls. Okay. Why? Because they assume that this is a symptom of the mania. Right. Oh, the patient's writing all over the walls. Well, that's a symptom, right? Meanwhile, it's also the patient's art. Right? So just because it's a symptom doesn't mean it's not an actual part of their humanity, which is where we get a little bit lost in psychiatry with like, when we give it a diagnosis, sometimes you need a diagnosis because you need diagnosis, again, etymologically, is to know thoroughly, right? So sometimes the diagnosis is a doorway into knowing someone more thoroughly, and sometimes it's a door that shuts. Oh, we have the diagnosis. We figured it out.
Right.
So now that the artwork is diagnosed as a manic symptom, it doesn't count as art. So it's like, how do we shift that frame of why, when we notice that a person is having a symptom, what is our reaction to the symptom? Oh, we have to fix it? Why? What if the symptom is our doorway into understanding? Like, what if the symptom is our doorway into their creativity? What if the symptom is the body communicating? And you were saying before, what does it mean to be safe in the body?
Right.
Well, firstly, you have to appreciate that every symptom in the body is your body talking to you in some way. So how do you bring that into a psychiatrist's office and turn this into a conversation of actual bringing more safety into the body? Not, oh, I'm afraid of that symptom, I need to help you medicate it away. But
that's happening. A lot. I'm saying, let's say you go on for schizophrenia, they're just shutting down the symptoms, right?
That's the most extreme example of it. And someone recommended the movie Harriet. Did you see it yet?
No.
It's about Harriet Tubman. And I don't know how much of it is
It's a new movie? It's an old movie?
I think it's pretty new.
Right.
It's really, okay. It's very inspirational, actually. And I don't know how much of it is the actual history and how much of it is the movie. But let's say she has, during her slavery, a traumatic brain injury from the abuse, physical abuse.
That's a theory in this movie?
It shows it in the movie. It's in the movie.
Wow, okay.
And she starts to have these spells. And essentially during these fainting spells, she's shown glimpses of the future, or she's given kind of directives to like free her people. Or even when she's running from the slave owners who are trying to catch her, she's shown like go left instead of go right. And when she comes to her freedom, she meets a freedom fighter and he's taking a history of her past, and he asks about physical abuse. So she says, oh yeah, I got a crack in the skull, but it just helps me hear God more clearly. So you see him like keeping eye contact and kind of nodding as if he understands, right? And then he writes down, like a good psychiatrist in the book, possible brain damage. Right? When they do that, they're really listening to your every word and they're like, wow, tell me more about your experience. Meanwhile, they're writing down possible brain damage. Right? So to her, she refused to believe, she didn't adopt a paradigm that would imprison her into seeing her symptoms as dangerous. She refused that paradigm and she chose to listen to what God was telling her. And she's a interesting example because she actually freed hundreds of people from slavery,
Right.
right? So she actually did something real with it. So psychosis is an interesting example where how much of it is the actual experience of psychosis and how much of it is the terror in our society and culture of, oh my God, I don't know what to do with this person. Because if we really had the patience and the fortitude and the confidence, by the way, on the part of the practitioners to hold that and stay curious about it, I mean, what would we discover? There could be God talking through that person and saying that here in 2025, as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, you could see somebody already diagnosing me and being like, she all there, right? Meaning these are kind of quirky ideas that could you people.
I mean, I'm writing notes right now. Definitely brain damage.
Some delusional thinking, meaning it's almost grandiose to think that we could change the face of this profession and really become people who are practitioners who bring science to it and evidence-based clinical practice. And also we kind of surrender to, wow, we don't actually know. Like, we don't actually know what state of mind this person is integrating. Meaning someone can be going into a very open state that is mania by all counts. But if they have the vessel to integrate it, maybe it's a spiritual awakening for them. Like, maybe it is.
Right.
And I'm not saying we shouldn't, put people.
I don't know if we have the place to be able to hold those people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really what society comes down to, is that what do I do with this person? How is this person going to be married and have a family? And it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit with our paradigm.
And also,
where does it go?
Let's just say we can draw a line. Like, if there's a danger to self or others,
Yeah.
it's one type of scenario. But if it's not a danger to self or others, and it just seems weird to us, or it seems abnormal to us, right? But we're in a state of external safety. Can we do better? Can we work on ourselves so we are bringing more curiosity and compassion and humility to states of mind that people may be integrating that could be scary for them? But if we bring confidence to the scenario, they may find more confidence within themselves to, instead of disowning that experience or disowning that part of themselves, to work it in.
I hear you. So I'm going to ask you a direct question. If all medicine disappeared tomorrow.
All medicine?
No, all psychiatric medicine.
Oh, psychotropics.
Psychotropics.
Okay.
Sorry. Maybe not psychedelic. Let's keep the psychedelics into the picture first. All psychotropic medication are gone. Like, what is going to be the damage and the outcome after that happens? Like, in your theory, this is a wild, like, post-apocalyptic conversation.
Ultimately, it would be like removing another external variable where we would just have one less thing we're chasing outside of ourselves. Meaning, psychiatric medications can bring extreme benefit to people in vulnerable states, and they are a tool in the toolkit. But as a collective, so many of us are distracted by them. Right?
I mean, is it the distraction of, like, that's the answer? Is that the distraction?
It is the frustration you're describing with psychedelics. I face a similar frustration with psychiatric medications.
So
Meaning, why is this the core issue? Why is this the fix? Meaning, like, what else is going on with your kid? What else is going on with your physical body? Like, are you actually sleeping? Are you actually eating real food? Like, do you actually have people you can talk to? Why is the psychiatric medication the urgent matter right now? Also people come with that same frenzied urgency. Like, they've been dealing with this problem for 3 years and all of a sudden they need a prescription now. It's like, what is that about?
Right. Well, I think every time I've mentioned that I have real issues with psychotropic medication. And I'm not so sure about it. Like, I talked to my sister Abigail, and she's like she's just anti. medication, like for any psychotropics. She deals with ADHD and like will not prescribe, like she's anti. And she has a lot of philosophy behind it. And like I'm in that direction.
Right.
But it's not because I'm really anti. It's just that I've seen so much damage on the bad side.
Yeah, that's where
That I'm wondering if it'd be better if it was not there, because I don't know when it's going to be all right. And I see it being given out so freely.
Yeah.
And it, so
the
I really-
economics
could
of
you-
it, the economics of it don't really work in the individual's favor either. Because
What does that mean?
I mean, there's so much motivation to prescribe and so little motive. You don't get paid to do the painstaking labor of helping someone come off their medications. You don't get paid by insurance for that the same way you get paid to put someone on medications. So on balance, if we just remove that variable, like would we spend more time figuring out what are the holding spaces to help someone through a manic episode or a psychotic episode? I'm with you on that curiosity.
I've had guys in my house, they go through a manic episode, and if they're not dangerous, our policy is to hold them.
Mm-hmm.
And almost without fail, they all pass through it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're dangerous, then we have to go to the next step.
Mm-hmm.
But we've watched some very, very fascinating stuff. If we could hold them, and if we have enough, people.
I also
watching
have
them
a lot of curiosity around the work people are doing when people are doing psychedelic therapy well on preparing the mindset for an intense psychedelic experience. If we taught those same tools to people with mania, preparing them with the mindset to go into an expansive experience, to learn from it, to grow through it, to experience something out of the ordinary, would that help people?
Wow, it's a fascinating question.
Yeah, I think it would be a great, research study, but these are the important questions that are so much more interesting to me than a study that comes out and says Lexapro versus psilocybin for major depressive disorder. It's like, wouldn't you be more curious about if we actually prepared people to have a non-ordinary experience, how they fare? Or not even only people who are manic, people who struggle with postpartum depression. Like if we actually prepare people with the mindset of curiosity, and it comes back to confidence, like you said, because one person can go through an episode of postpartum depression and it completely shakes up their whole sense of identity. Another person can go through it. What makes that actual difference? You still didn't tell me what the solution is to
how to build a self-esteem.
Yeah.
I think it's very simple.
Okay.
I mean, it took a long time to figure out.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying that it takes two elements. One is the element of worthiness, which is being held by a community of people and people telling you you're loved and lovable and all that enough times that you change your schema to I am lovable,
Right.
from I am unlovable. And that's really what has to change. When that changes, then the rest of it's fairly easy. Meaning it's like, people are like, I don't know what to do, they say to me. Like, everybody's like very focused on how to live your life, go to the gym. So I'll say, you don't know what to do? Is that true? Because let's go through your day. Wake up in the morning. You want to wake up early or late? Oh, yeah, early. Do you want to make your bed or not make your bed? Oh, make your bed. Oh, you want to brush your teeth or not brush your teeth? I'm like, it's not rocket science how to do it.
To be a human.
The question is why you're not doing it. And majority of the answer is that you just don't feel worth it. You just don't feel all right to go do that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel held. You don't feel purpose. You don't see anything. So the answer was, that's why I created these sober living homes and created it with this model, is that there are people for one reason or another that just forgot they're worth it. They just forgot. Now it could be because, and we talk about the trauma and it's leaking out. It's gone. We don't believe that we're worthy because we're living in enormous amounts of shame and we don't feel the worthiness. Mm-hmm. If I could get someone back to worthiness, then we can start working. It's not that the answer is there, is that I now have the base for the connection that creates the worthiness. That when we talk about parents or loved ones, they're just telling us they're the mashal to Hashem. We're looking and we're saying, oh, this person who's bigger than me loves me. Therefore, I'm part of something greater and I'm lovable. The real difficulty of the work that I do is that they're adults. And adults are cynical. Kids are not. when you're creating it in the babyhood, you tell someone they're lovable, you say it enough, and they're like, oh, I guess I'm lovable.
It's harder to, it's almost like that's where in trauma work, or also with psychedelics, it's almost like you're going through an age regression where you're reopening a critical window. So when you get that experience of it's all perfect or I'm loved, your brain is actually in the more open state of a child.
Right.
So maybe that's some of the value even in stage 1 of the right kind of therapy or the right kind of medicine, if it can reopen those critical windows of learning.
Well, that's the idea, is that if you're in stage 1, if you're living your life like a dependent person and you're living in that stage of like, I am a baby, there's a benefit to it. Now, okay, you're a baby. Now I'm going to tell you over and over and over and over you're loved. And then that baby part of you that's a dreamer, that thinks that Mashiach is coming tomorrow, that thinks that there's a guru coming to save me. And there's it.
He's coming, Sonny. He's coming.
Okay.
He's already here.
Sorry. This is a different part of your life. I don't know if I'm going to mess. I'm not messing with Mashiach here. But the idea is, and we're tapping into this. There is a
So you're
savior.
allowing them to kind of regress into baby, and
I'm not allowing them to regress into baby. They already regressed. I am just meeting
Making
them
room
at
for that.
baby. I'm going to baby. I won't tell a baby the way to fix you is to get your act together, because that's not how a baby gets worthiness. It doesn't get from worthiness. Now, it gets competence from getting your act together. Meaning after you feel worthy, then you say, hey, why don't you try getting a job? Yeah, because I'll fail. No, you got this. Go try that job and fail. Oh, you failed? No problem. Let's try it again. That's, like when I split it up, I kind of split it into the mother and the father.
Okay, so what do you suggest for the masses out there who are ringing their local psychiatrist, who have kids in a marriage, who can't come to our village and be babies? But they're actually babies inside.
Yeah. This is a question that keeps me up at night. I'm not going to lie. This is, if everybody has a question that keeps them up, is that my biggest desire is not to have our village. My biggest desire is to use our village as the model for, hey, this is simpler than you think. Let's spread this into everybody's lives. And let's do that. I don't know exactly how to do it. I don't know exactly how to do it, but I do know is that we threw out the baby with the bathwater when we moved into this, our new communities, and we don't have communities that are dependent on each other and holding each other at constant state. We separated for whatever reasons. And I could go back to the reasons that I think it is. It was the Industrial Revolution that we got all spread out. We left to the cities, and we're not in these little villages where we have to hold each other.
Right. So
we're now spread out. I don't want to give back that stuff back. There's good stuff that comes out of it. But the problem is now how do I say, guys, if you're not stuffed together in a community like a pack of wolves, if you're not together like a pack, you're all gonna be hurting.
Right.
Everybody, we're talking therapy, and my biggest question is constantly, with all this therapy and all this help and all the psychiatry and everything, you would think we would be trending up.
Well, very few people are still actually getting access to quote unquote good care.
That's not true. I don't agree. I think they have more access in our lives.
To what though? To good care.
Well, good care could. Most people are going to 20 therapists. One of them's got to be good. The old days you'd go to a therapist and that was it. You one-to-one therapy. There's so many people. We didn't have therapists. Most people didn't go to therapists.
Okay,
right?
Let's say the stuff you're talking about, which is the stuff that I get excited about, even if I have to prescribe medications or do psychotherapy, this is the actual stuff I get excited about, is not about necessarily the practitioner's level of skill, but it's about the practitioner's felt sense of safety in their own skin, which comes from the practitioner having a pack to fall back on. So
nobody's got the pack.
Well, right. So, but there is hope here because I feel much more held in community now than I did 10 years ago. And I see the difference in the lives of the people I work with from that. So I think there's hope in that our village is an example of hubs, and people are kind of coming. Once you step into the water, like Nachshon, people follow you into the water, even if you didn't tell them to follow you, right? It's like you crack through a certain barrier, and then the barrier has been broken for the world. So I'm not saying we're in Mashiach in terms of mental health quite yet. And I'm also saying that you're creating a hub. People can learn from that and create hubs.
Right.
And if the practitioners have hubs, that means they show up to the sessions more regulated. That means they're not just giving people psychotherapy. There's actually an energetic exchange happening. Where if the practitioner actually loves themselves and actually loves the person they're sitting in front of, that does make a huge difference in their week. It's not the same as having a community or a tribe, but it really is a lot better than nothing.
Right.
But if you're sitting with a therapist who doesn't yet love themselves, that's not good care. Meaning, it's not that you won't gain anything from it, right? You may learn really important strategies and tools and cognitive reframes, but it's not going to feed the soul in this way.
Right.
It's not going to fill the tank, as you're saying. So,
I mean, also the other thing is it's just once a week or just 3 times a week. It's just one of the things that I'm trying to figure out how to make it work is that our village is an immersive experience.
right.
I mean, it is all the time. Even if you're fighting it, you can't go anywhere. There's just people attacking you with love in all directions.
You heard of object permanence, right?
Yes.
So if somebody knows that our village exists, it may help them even if they don't live in our village. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting.
Meaning, if someone knows that they're meeting with a practitioner who's hooked in with a hub, that if they really need to go away and be immersed 24/7, they can. That's going to help them even when they're not. So I think that as we network like the trees, as practitioners, so we're actually supporting each other, then we're introducing that network to the people that we work with.
Right.
So just the mere fact that a woman at home with her baby knows that worst comes to worst, she could come to a place like this, it's going to help her even when she's at home. And then she might not need to actually come.
Right.
She might just feel more held right where she is.
Well, I think the most fascinating part of this experience, that because we're pretty new in this experiment that I like to call our village, is that the people that graduated, they always have us. So they can move anywhere and there's still that connection. But meaning it's still working way past 3 years, 4 years, 5 years past being in that immersive experience, because they know that everybody there is there for them. So that's the object permanence that you're talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know how someone who never came to the program could get that. That's maybe a little more mystical to me.
It's psychological, actually, because you inform them that if they get to their wits' end, there's a place where they can actually go live. You can help them get set up there. Right. Psychological. So now they have that in their psychological awareness.
But how do we do this for people who are not at their wits' end?
Uh-huh.
I think most people are not at their wits' end. I almost feel spoiled, because I get all the people that are like, I can't do anything, I got to be there, and they're like, they have the gift of desperation. They don't have a choice. They have to show up. But there's so many people that just live in these lives of quiet desperation. They're just like, I don't know what to do, and they're just sitting there all alone. And there may be a room full of people, but no one's holding them. No one needs them.
Well, what's going on with you that you're spending your time right now caring about these people?
I'm a train wreck. You want to get into me? No.
Yeah, meaning like we are going to do the holy work that we're here to do in the world. And part of that is that we may not reach everyone. And part of that is that there are problems that are beyond our ability to solve. And that doesn't hold us back from bringing more light into the world, like that can reach people wherever they are, at whatever stage of readiness they are for a change. And that, I don't know, gives me some hope on my darkest days. You know how with addicts, you talk about how you love being in their company because they're such spiritual, sensitive people. I just feel like that about everyone that I work with that has mental health challenges. Like, I don't have the question in my mind, why would someone have a psychiatric issue? In fact, I have the opposite question in my mind. How would anyone living in this world as we know it not have a psychiatric issue? Right?
Yeah.
How are people not awake at night thinking about, I don't know, the hostages, whatever it is that's tearing your heart apart, or people who are at home with 4 babies and pregnant and can't get out of bed. Like, how are people not toppled over?
Norm Macdonald has a
Yeah.
bit. Norm Macdonald, you know who Norm Macdonald
No.
is? The greatest comedian of all time, in my opinion.
Okay.
But Norm Macdonald has a bit where he's like, you know, somebody, you hear about somebody who committed suicide, and people just say, I don't get how they do that. And he's like, really? Is everything? How do you not get it? I'm not saying do it, but
I mean,
how do you not get it?
How do you?
You're just living in this world, and everything is just you just don't get wanting to end
completely
this.
upside down.
Right.
Yeah, and even if you were having a good day, it's like by the hairbreadth, right? Like David Hamelech, you know, by the shadow of the valley of the shadow of death, right? You're that close to the edge where your neighbor is not. Is whatever's going on with them. They lost a child. They just got a cancer diagnosis. Like, you're that close to real suffering, even if you're having a good day. Like, how does that really help? And you had a Remy on here, and I learned a lot from you, Javed Garari, in the sense that for whatever reason, I always internalized her as a person who had this big spiritual, this, like with the addict, like, not whatever her specific issues are, she wanted out. She was like, this is not the way it's meant to be. Like, I'm off, right?
Right.
And I don't see that as coming from a necessarily dark place, in the sense that I think that could also be coming from a very deep place of wanting more, of believing in more, of believing in a better world. And I think one of the ways that I've had a few people that I worked with who were lost, who passed away to suicide, and I feel like they're very much part of my work, in the sense that they're that voice that's reminding me to take this person's experience really seriously, and to see that they're not just stuck in themselves. They're really open. They're in a very open state where they're really feeling not just the pain of themselves, but the pain of all those around them. And we have to maybe model to people like that how to actually have emotional boundaries, where it's like, it's not your pain to carry. It's like, it almost is like a distraction if I'm worrying about and I think this applies to therapists and practitioners. It's much easier to get lost in the people you're working with and their pain, but come back to your own pain, because your own pain is your own work to do in this world. And as you work with your own pain, you just become a more conducive catalyst for others. So it's that fine line of caring and of having empathy, and not letting that become the Mashiach that distracts you from whatever's actually right here in this physical body. Because, I mean, we have so many spiritual teachings that point us back to the pain is the redemption. It's just, you don't burr the baby without the pain of labor. It's just how it works. I mean, we can stomp our feet and say it's not fair.
Right.
But the pain is what also neurobiologically, when a memory gets ingrained in your brain, it's usually because memory came with pain. If you're having coffee and you're like chilling with your friend, it's like 2 weeks later, you don't remember any of the details.
Right.
But if you were abused, you have flashbacks from any minute reminder. Why does it get seared into the subconscious like that? Because it hurt. Right?
Right.
So the pain is the way back to that wound, for it to be held in your adult consciousness and the body that you're inhabiting right now. And to be working with other people's pain and to stay on your toes, healing your own pain, is a very high bar. It takes a lot of work.
So you're talking about for the practitioner.
Practitioners themselves. Yeah. It's like I came across a Walt Whitman quote that struck me this week, which is, I don't ask the wounded person how they feel. I become the wounded person.
Okay. It's taking me a second. Hold on.
Which is like this, it's like true empathy, essentially.
Right.
It's not like, oh, hey, welcome to the therapy session today. How are you doing? Right? But it's more like, both people are landing into the here and now and attuning so that the practitioner actually has a felt sense of what the person is struggling with, and there's more of an energetic exchange. Or more like in attachment theory, there's a co-regulation that occurs.
Right. Well, I think that a lot of therapists are really trying to avoid that after a period of time. Meaning they may have tried in the beginning and realized that they are holding everybody's pain and no one's holding their pain. I mean, like I always had this thing, I get very weirded out that I don't think it's natural for one person to hold that many people.
Well, that's where like in NARM, the neuroaffective relational model, it's this 50-50. 50% I'm holding my own pain in the session, 50% I'm holding your pain with you, because I am there for you as the practitioner. You are paying me for my time.
Right.
But then I'm also going to my own therapy to
Right.
clear some of that out, or doing whatever I actually need to do between sessions. And coming back to psychiatry, I don't know if you've listened to Craig Heacock's Back from the Abyss podcast, Psychiatry and Stories.
No.
It's great. And he's like, what other medical profession would stand for being called prescribers or or can you imagine you go to your rheumatologist and the rheumatologist is like, yeah, I'll be your prescriber. It's like, wait, aren't you going to care for me? Like, aren't you my doctor? He was like, or
Wow.
like, what does the cardiologist do? The cardiologist does medication management. But in psychiatry, this is like the norm, on the website. Like, I provide medication management. I do not do psychotherapy. It's like, how can you possibly sit with a psychiatric patient and not be doing some version of therapy?
Right.
So Craig Heacock makes the point that when the practitioner writes, I don't do therapy, it pretty much means she bumbles through and does bad therapy. Because if you're...
there is some, you have to ask some questions.
Yeah, because if you're asking the person about their experience and you're understanding what their struggles are enough to medicate them,
Right.
how are you not doing any psychotherapy? So you may as well do
right.
you may as well do good psychotherapy, which is back to, in the sense that it's for a psychiatric nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist to try to turn themselves into a prescriber is so demoralizing. You can't really sustain yourself that way. So many of us choose, even if it's making a lot less money, to back away from doing medication management, which what is that even?
Right.
To going back to the root of psychiatry, which is unraveling the mystery of the psyche and its suffering, one unraveling at a time. And medications may turn up in that process.
So so let me just ask this straight. What is the goal of medication in psychiatry?
Symptom reduction. And if we're transparent about that, it helps, because then we don't have to oversell it. We don't have to be like, oh, this medication is going to heal your wounded soul, because it's not. Or this medication is going to resolve your trauma, because it's not going to do that. This medication may reduce symptoms. And what are the symptoms? Right.
So saying that it's anti-anxiety, what is this? Sorry. Saying it's anti-anxiety,
it's really only meaningful if
it's not anti-anxiety, it's some anxiety symptoms.
Some anxiety symptoms. Right. Meaning some medications may actually reduce, let's say, the quantity of somebody's obsessional thinking, right? It may actually quiet that ruminative loop. How it does that is also a mystery, in the sense that we may know its mechanism of action in the brain, but we still don't know how it would reduce something like obsessional thinking. But more on a more concrete level, it might sedate. So essentially, psychiatric medications, of vast oversimplification, are either activating, Adderall, sedating, Klonopin, or some combination of the two. So that's how they reduce symptoms. Because if you are essentially, if you think of psychiatric conditions in terms of, a lot of them are masquerading, trauma masquerading or magnifying the discomfort of the human experience, then depression is freeze or flop in the fight, flight, freeze, fornicate, fawn, right? Anxiety is flee, right? Anger is fight, right? Meaning you can map these symptoms onto either diagnoses, right? If they're primarily can't get out of bed, then it's major depressive disorder. If they primarily can't get their heart rate down, is a generalized anxiety disorder. You can also map it onto the drives: fight, flight, freeze, grieve. You could stick with the F's, or you could get more fancy, right? Fancy, or you could get fancier. So if you're in a flop, then you may take an activating medication to perk you up. And if you're very activated, you may take a sedating medication to mellow you down.
So why, I mean, it's interesting because what you said before is like the pain is bringing us back to
the
what we
wound.
have to the wound. Wouldn't that be stopping us from getting back to the wound if we try to put the symptoms away?
In a sense, and also if the symptoms are too overwhelming for the person to even function, then giving them some containment. Let's say you think of the medication as containing overwhelming affect.
Right.
So now they're back maybe closer to their window of tolerance. So back to confidence. Now they maybe have the confidence to work with their pain or discomfort.
Okay.
Meaning if somebody is yelling in pain, they're not doing any healing like that. They're yelling in pain. So if you
I
are...
once had a psychiatrist explain to me that his, and I it was the best explanation I've gotten so far. Not that your explanation is not much better. It's way better.
Start again, Sonny.
So far, this is better. This is the best in the past. But, he explained to me that he only medicates for people who need to get to a even playing field so that they can function. So it's like from dysfunction to ground zero.
-5 to 0.
Right. -5 to 0. And then now you got to do the work. But he's not trying to get you to like fix you on any level. He's trying to get you to a place where you're not yelling in pain, like you said.
So that's to speak to your question of how does this help? If they're at 0, maybe there's someone home that can do some actual work. But getting people from -5 to 0, I mean, it's not the most inspiring life mission. Meaning like it's incredibly important. And also, I think anyone who's devoted their life to mental health wants people to be thriving. Is very much, that's where the passion kicks in as a practitioner, right?
Right.
When you start to see someone come alive and you start to see them have relationships and have purpose. And sometimes the medications does get in the way of getting from surviving to thriving, because sometimes you really do have to crack through layers of dissociation and really build the confidence to work with whatever your body is going to give you. And let's say this is maybe the art of psychiatry. Meaning, let's say if you're dealing with someone who has maybe a family history of bipolar disorder.
Right.
And lithium kept their mother out of the hospital. And they've had 3 psychiatric hospitalizations. It's like, yeah, you may want them on lithium. And also, you probably do, right? And also the psychodynamic piece we were talking about before of how do you work with them so the lithium is a tool in their toolbox. So they have agency over their life experience in their body, and they're grateful to have lithium as a tool versus I can't live without lithium. I would be behind bars, or I'd be in some loony bin. Meaning like as a psychiatrist or psychiatric provider, there's so much opportunity to work with the psyche as you're bringing medications on board or phasing medications out in terms of restoring agency and letting the person use this tool to build their own confidence, not the other way around.
And I mean, I think the reason I've become so anti in a sense is that I haven't seen a lot of people seeing it the way you're seeing it. I'm just seeing people being medicated forever and like they come in, I need more, and they get more. And it's not a springboard to change. I will say with bipolar, I do not know any other way.
So that's a specific example.
That's a very specific
and
one.
Also, it's not the majority of the demographics it's not the majority of individuals in general. It's a minority.
Yes.
So let's say the majority of people that I end up seeing are people who seem pretty traumatized. We can define that later.
Right.
And also are also struggling with their identity. And also, like you said, don't feel worthy. Like they just don't feel good. So for those people, working, if you have someone who, like you said, you get the people who just can't, so it's easy for you. If you get someone with full-blown bipolar disorder and family history bipolar, the ethical issues are straightforward. It's simple. But if you get someone who's complex and you don't know how much of it is their trauma trying to come out for healing, right? You don't know much of it is them trying to find their place in their community. Then the ethics of where you bring a medication in become much murkier. And that's where their agency is hugely important. And the language that we use in the process of starting a medication can really make it or break it. People might like to pay a huge amount of money to go to a very authoritative psychiatrist who's going to tell them what to do and yell at them if they do anything else. Right. But that's coming from a very young place to need that kind of treatment, to be willing to pay money for that kind of treatment, right? We want to help people evolve and grow into a state of confidence where they can say no thank you, where you can present the options to them and be like, look, here's what you're bringing to the table. Here's how a couple of agents can help. Which one would you like to try?
Right.
Sometimes people get really angry when I do that because they're like, you're the one with the medical license. And I'm like, true that. And you're the one who has to live in your physical body and experience your human experience on these agents. So yeah, you get to choose.
I could see why they're frustrated with that. I could see they're like, just give me the answer, please.
Right.
And don't make it more difficult.
Why are you making it so complicated? My life is already so complicated. And that's again, the art of psychiatry is how do you meet the person where they're at?
See, every time it needs an art, I'm scared.
Every time what?
Every time anything needs an art, it makes me scared. And it's the same thing with therapy. Psychotherapy, you need real art. It always makes me scared because there are many, many, many practitioners who do not have the art. They're just practitioners.
Right. They say in psychoanalytic thought, like a premature interpretation is just as harmful as the wrong interpretation.
Could you explain that a little better?
When an analyst or a therapist offers an interpretation back to the person, but the person's not ready for that interpretation, it's just as damning to like the confidence they were building along the way and the trust that they were building in the practitioner. There's maybe more to it.
I have that with one of my favorite things to do is listen to like radio show therapists where they call in and they tell their problem, and then the therapist who gets it because they've been working, they're therapists. I get it too, and they just tell them the issue and they just give it to them, and then my favorite thing is to think, what happens after that phone call?
Right. Then what?
And the person hangs up, it's like, oh, it's about my father. Okay, I got it. Now I'm good.
Right. So that's where people are like, what do they do in analysis 3 times a week for 3 hours each? It's like they're going deep into this the artsy way, and I have respect for that because I can understand that some people would need that. And let's just say, since your listeners are listening to a podcast, what gets lost in these discussions is it's so personal. It's like, yeah, there may be someone who I would see who I would not give 2 options to because that would be too confusing for them.
Right.
I'm still going to operate under the belief that this person deserves to make decisions about what they take in or don't take into their body, even if I make a decision to keep it really simple for them at this time in their lives. So it's just also comes from my own personal experience as a person who went through mental health treatments myself. Meaning in the moment, it might have felt really nice to have an all-knowing figure come and tell me what was wrong with me. And also it took years of work to rebuild my confidence from that. Even with psychiatric medications, back in the day, psychiatrists used to try them all. So I've tried my fair share of them in my attempts to help myself navigate the complexities of the human experience. And it took me a while to really build the confidence to say no, thank you. Not from a place of, I don't deserve that help, like with the addicts, because we all do deserve that help, but from a place of that's not resonating with me. Like, I want to experience the full scope of my own medicine. whether
Yeah, but I'm having, okay, so let me
Okay.
ask you more practical. Like and this happens constantly in the house and the homes and that I'm running and with other people I've dealt with. They don't want to take medication and the world is forcing them to take. And even I'm forcing them to take. to tell you
you're
the
like,
truth.
please just take
No,
take
'cause-
your med.
No, because my thing is that if you're on meds, you're not getting off it unless you're getting a professional
Yeah.
to work with you to get it off. It too dangerous for me. I might not have suggested those meds in the first place, but that's not my business. See, we got to work from where you're at, and a lot of guys are like, "Hey, I'm done. I don't like this. I don't like thinking like this. I'm done." And then serious traumatic experience comes with like, so how do you?
Wait. How is that a serious traumatic experience?
Serious traumatic things very often happen. For example, getting off SSRIs without any help, they just get off.
And then
They're
they
like, this is not resonating.
and then they feel sick.
And they're very sick. They get more
But
depressed than
I
ever,
was talking
or-
about my personal process, and that was very gradual.
Gotcha.
Okay, so it wasn't my personal challenge of being like on an impulse. Okay, and let's say these are the real challenges that the art of psychiatry faces, which is staying attuned to the person and where they're at and how much of them is actually consenting to this medication and how much of it is objecting to it. And whatever their decisions are, being there to support them through it. And if they make an impulsive decision to stop an SSRI cold turkey, they may suffer some consequences, they may not. And you're still their provider. You're still there to walk them through whatever their decisions are. I feel like you were getting at something more there. And also, I just want to say, I would love to just take a break from being anti anything personally. Like, I don't want to be anti psychedelics. I don't want to be anti medications. I don't want to be anti therapy. I don't want to be anti spiritual bypassing. Like, I just want to say that I respect each human and their willingness and openness to take it, to traverse the imperfect path that is uniquely theirs. You know, I was in a modern Orthodox shul this Shabbos in Stanford, and I opened up Reb Yosef Soloveitchik's book on repentance.
Okay.
And it was like, if you have sin all over you, don't try to get to the palace on the king's route because they will remove you, right? But do find the meandering path that is uniquely yours, where you can walk the path as you shed your layers of sin and come back to a state of readiness to greet the king, something like that.
That's
and
beautiful.
It's beautiful, right? And sin here, I'm interpreting not as like a moral sin, but as more as like those missed opportunities, those wounds, those traumas, the things that keep us in a outfit that we feel like I don't deserve to have an audience with the king. And it's just like, don't rush it. Don't get on the king's highway and then be surprised when someone kicks you off. Like, take your time. Usually if something is coming with a major urgency, it's that major urgency needs the care. It's not the thing that you think you urgently need that you actually need. It's the urgency that you need to care for.
Right. It's like being anxious about being anxious.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, you know, if you feel like you need to be on, you know.
Well, I like what you're saying with the, you know, it's funny because I do get lost in the weeds with being anti things. I shouldn't say I'm anti. I'm cynical. I'm cynical about a lot of things.
Right. You're like the most pro anti guy, but yeah.
I'm not into being anti, but I think that there's never a time where questions end. And we have to question everything. It can be exhausting. And sometimes it comes out as anti, but I really like that. I almost felt calmed when you said, let's just take a break from being anti.
Yeah. Let's just take a breather.
It actually like, I felt my body like go,
yeah.
Oh, okay. I could just be curious. And maybe a little cynical, and maybe a little hopeful, and maybe this, but not. I do find myself, I think when people come in with like this is it, I immediately go anti. And that's, you know, part of my personality. I'm like, I'm always taking the devil's advocate.
Yeah.
But
you
it
don't
becomes
want people
real.
to get too comfortable.
And I'm like, because everybody has the answer. even myself, I'm running programs and I'm so proud of the work we're doing. And people are like, "Oh, so you think that's the answer?" I will not say that's the answer. I will not say it. I'm curious and cynical about my own approaches. I could say what I've seen, and I could say that it's part of the answer.
Right.
But I know that it's lacking much. And like when I say I wish people would follow me, part of that is I wish people would follow me and do it better. Like find my flaws and do it better. But don't keep going in the direction that's not working. Like, let's do this together. Like, I know I'm kind of excited because we're opening the women's house now, and already I'm speaking to my sister who's be running it. And
It's awesome.
she already has different ideas. They're in the same genre, so I'm like, cool, let's do it.
Yeah.
But it's exciting that someone's taking my approach and then building on it and doing something. So I think it's going in a beautiful way, but I'm even cynical about my own stuff, which is maybe does not come off, by the way. One of the things
Well, I mean, as long as we're alive, we're asking questions, right? And like you said, it's frustrating for people. They're like, just give me the answer. And that's part of that. Just send me the savior. Just give me, where is my mother? And it's for us to sit with that frustration. It's like, and to have the courage to continue to ask the hard questions.
On the other side, by the way, it is really nice to be a rebel. I don't want to say this. No, because once in a while I get someone who will just be like, I want the answer. And I'll say, you want to know what I think? And I'll just say it. And then they just listen and they go off. I could see the temptation of coming in with that confidence.
Also, back to the attunement, sometimes that is the medicine a person needs. For you to just be the father and just tell them to go to bed or to eat breakfast, meaning back to the attunement, there's room for all of it. And also, it's awesome that the women's home is together. And I do think it's a hub for all of us, even those who are not actually living here, because it's just one more place where people can have hope. If they are needing our village quantities of love, it exists.
Right.
For women. For Jewish women.
I also think that at some point, maybe this stuff could be free. I gotta figure out how. I think it could be self-run and free. I think it could.
Keep us posted on that one.
Yeah, I just don't know how yet. Because right now I'm still hiring people, so I don't know how to make it free. I still got to pay the rent.
Well, the good news is the essence of everything you're talking about is free. And I think that's an important message for people in today's world where literally everything is commodified and prices just, it's like some of what you actually are seeking to heal is not expensive. And
it's not.
That's so liberating. And I feel so much compassion for people who still feel like they have to dish out. It's when you're paying that kind of money, it's like, what are you even actually paying for? Right. Meaning what our human bodies need is the stuff that we're on the race to nowhere here. Like you want to dish out another $750 for the most glamorous psychiatric evaluation you can get. Like what are they actually giving to you in that time? So I just want people to feel confident enough to demand good care. Right. Demand that your practitioners actually listen. And it's not rocket science, right? It's like even if you have a patient who you're seeing in a psychiatric unit in the hospital and they tell you they have constipation. It's like, you don't have to just be like, oh, that's no big deal. Like everyone on that medication gets constipation. It's like, listen to their experiences in their physical body, because it's not just a side effect. It's them trusting you enough to tell you. And it's like this woman who was in the room and maybe she was almost asking, who's going to notice the art on the wall? And it was like every time somebody walked in and just looked down at the paper, it was like, oh yeah, I don't trust you. Right?
Right.
I don't feel safe here. Like I want to go home. Like how is this actually helping me? And
it's a fascinating story, that one with the art on the wall, because I know as someone, like, you don't want to encourage more mania. You know what I'm saying? Like,
but it was in the sense that back to like, if it's harmless, then why not create vessels for it? And this is where I come back to the broken vessels of like, in order for the light of godliness to come into this realm, there was a breaking of the kalim, right? And in a sense, when people are going through a mental health challenge, there's a certain breaking of the kalim that's happening. And that can be scary. It's like people want things held together. But also, we don't know what is emerging in that. And for us to panic and freak out while a process is in the middle is kind of like an abortion, right? Meaning like something is coming forward in that person that they haven't yet integrated. And it's like, maybe it can be some sort of birth or rebirth. And I know that that's very optimistic, but I also just feel passionate about this right now because also women's mental health is a huge topic. And just thinking about the cycle of life and death that occurs in a woman's body every month.
Right.
Where there's every month the potential for a new human being to be formed. And every menstrual cycle is sort of the body grieving. And then we come out and we're like, why is she acting so erratic? And we come out with a diagnosis of PMDD. It's like maybe she's actually just in touch with the grief that's happening in her body, and there's not a lot of space in her life to digest that.
Right.
Right? Like women who work are expected to show up every day of the month and work. There's no variation in your work obligations based on your menstrual cycle. So people come up with these, maybe, I don't want to call them gimmicks, but like, you said you have a visceral reaction when someone offers the new thing.
Right.
So people will come and say like, do you offer hormonal mental health? Like that's the new thing. And it's like, you're a woman, your body is hormonal mental health. There's a cycle of hormones that's happening every month. And you have a right to discover how to integrate that and how to find balance through that. And if you don't know yet, there's nothing wrong with you. It's like we're only starting our adult development when we maybe spread our wings and fly and leave our parents' homes. And people are already married with 4 kids, but they're like 28. And they're like, why am I still struggling? It's like, why are you still struggling? Your frontal lobe just completed its development.
Right.
You've literally just started to ask yourself, how do I want to live my life differently from the way my parents modeled it to me? And on top of that, you've had 3 pregnancies in the past 4 years. Don't you think it makes sense that you don't have it figured out yet?
Right. It's interesting. While you're saying this, I had a feeling for myself. I'm going to share it because I remember almost every time I've gone through like a real serious healing process, I had the same thing included with psychedelics. And I want to go into psychedelics a little bit more for a second, but
we have to.
We don't have to.
Sure,
we don't have
sure.
to. We're not anti. We don't have to. My experience almost every time I'm ready for a breakthrough and ready for like real growth. And my experience is I can't fall apart. There's nobody's going to hold me. It's just going to be me. I feel like for me, it's very, very visceral. And there's a reason I'm in the work I do.
Because you're holding everyone up.
Yeah, well, I'm holding everyone up. And I definitely feel like I have to hold myself. Like I don't have, for some reason, I don't believe that anybody's going to hold me.
Catch you.
And I, like I had this, like when I was doing parts work with a therapist, my own parts work. And like the baby was always a bowling ball. Like it was just the heaviest bowling ball. Like no one could hold that baby. That's how it was always. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you could try to hold it, but just no chance you're going to be able to hold it. And my therapist at one point said like, I got this is not that heavy. I got this. I got this. It's not that bad. But I think that, again, we're going back to my ideas. They come from my own personal experience where all this stuff is true, but if I fall apart, who's got me? Like I have to fall apart to get through to the other side. Who's gonna hold me? I gotta hold my family. I gotta hold this. I'm just holding everybody. I'm holding all the pieces together, trying very hard to make it all work. And then I fall apart. Who's gonna hold me?
Right.
I feel like that is. I want to tell you a fascinating story that I had.
But it's almost like the therapy session. Oh, I want to hear the story.
Yeah.
Is like a little permission to fall apart, even if it's just for a little bit of time.
Yeah, so it does give you permission, and then you go back to life and like get back up and start trying
snap
to act.
Snap back to it.
Yeah, I remember after I actually was for a period of time, I did some really good therapy, and I took off a couple of hours after therapy. I just
Right.
wanted to sit in that for a couple of hours. So like I had like a half a day for therapy, even though it was 1 hour, and then
Right.
I like somehow cleared away like 4 hours afterwards, and I'd be like, I'm just gonna sit in it. I don't want to snap back too fast. I just want to be there still. I thought it was very special. But anyway, no, my story was. It was about I was someone was hitchhiking. I was driving down in Israel, and somebody was hitchhiking. I picked them up. We were in the Negev, like going into the south of Israel, and I picked one person up. Then I picked up another person. I was on a road trip with my daughter, and so I thought it'd be fun, to have more conversation in the car. It was a long drive, and the person who came into the car told me they were from this. I'm trying to remember the exact word. It's a kibbutz, but it was a kibbutz that had no law. It was a
Anarchy.
anarchist kibbutz.
Anarchist
There's
kibbutz.
2 anarchist kibbutz in Israel. So it's in the anarchist kibbutz, and their thing was it basically just all the money goes in, and we split it. That's you get based on how many people you have, and that's it. That's the whole thing. So you can go work, do whatever you want. You could get up, don't get up, doesn't matter. That's the rules were. The money goes in and everybody gets the money. If you're there, you're taken care of, birth to
You
death.
could be a baby.
That's it. Do whatever you want. So obviously for me, this was very fascinating because I was like, okay, so what happens if I was depressed for 2 years and I didn't do any work? Sazi. I was depressed for 2 years and I didn't do any work. So he thought about it and he said, yeah, then you get the money. It's like, you're part of the kibbutz. And I sat there and I was like, why did you think about that? I was thinking he's in his 30s. I'm like, you lived there your whole life. No one has ever stopped working for a year or two. It's like, I can't think of anyone.
Right.
I'm like, this guy lives in a community
where no one is
clinically depressed. And I it really struck me so powerfully. Like, this community got you. And because it's got you, you're doing. Meaning you don't even, because you're allowed to fall apart, you don't fall apart.
Right.
That was the idea.
Right.
Like, you could spend 10 years. Go for it.
Right.
It's like you're being dared.
Right. Because it's like we think we want to fall apart, but we really just want the permission to fall apart. And then we actually want to be in our adult selves, giving to the world, making things happen.
Right.
We love being productive. We're human beings.
And that's like the basis of what we do and what we're doing with the houses is like
giving them the
if
permission.
the bed is not made, it's not a thing to punish. It's a thing to worry about. Why is this person still not making their bed? Does that mean they're not held enough? Because everybody wants to make their bed.
Right.
Why is it not being made?
Like, what is actually going on with this person, which is where being a mental health professional becomes so much more interesting, where instead of asking the question, like, what diagnosis is this? You're asking the question, like, wait, what is this person actually telling me about their experience?
Yeah.
Like, what is up with this curious, mysterious, unique human being? Like, what's their deal, right? And just that curiosity is also so nourishing, because it's like maybe someone just hasn't been held in that way, like that their experience is interesting, that their experience is unique, that their experience like matters, that you're actually genuinely fascinated by them.
Right.
You're curious to learn more.
When you do that with people, do you get response? Do you like share that with them? I'm with you in your curiosity. Yeah. How do they respond to that?
Well, that's, I don't know if there's a general answer to that, but I think if the feeling is real and the resonance is really there, it has a positive effect.
Right. Yeah. I find so many people are looking for that Rebbe experience with me. Like, if they see me feeling like a little like, I don't really know. Mm-hmm. Like, let's discuss it more. Mm-hmm. They get nervous. Mm-hmm. I mean,
some people disappear. Some people disappear. But like, I feel like that's...
I'm going to someone who will give me an answer.
They're like, I'm going to go to someone who's going to charge me at least $750. This is not the real deal. And it's okay, meaning like no hard feelings.
Yeah.
Meaning like at this point in my life, I'm just going to do I'm going to follow my North Star. And
Right.
I'm going to say what comes from that. And I'm going to be with what comes from that. And if that doesn't work for the human being in front of them, meaning it's not an autistic North Star, like it's a North Star in relation to this human being that's presenting themselves, and which is
An autistic North Star?
it's not a North Star just between me and God.
Oh, okay.
It's also between, meaning it's not my own bubble. Sorry if that was
Okay, no, I like the name.
distasteful. I don't know if that's I won't overthink it. But coming back
I
to
didn't think anything of it.
it's not it's a North Star between, it's a relational North Star, let's just say.
Right.
Where if like through attuning to this person, this is what comes out, I'm going to trust that, because what else do I have to trust? Right? At this point, it's like I'm trusting my own connection with Hashem and the work that I've done with myself and the timing that this person is in front of me, that there's hashgacha pratis in that, and that I can trust that. Like you're saying, there's something to fall back on. Otherwise, I'm not going to even try to help another human being if I don't trust that there's something bigger that is guiding both of us. Like, what chutzpah do you have to insert yourself in somebody else's the inner workings of their life if you don't feel like you're both there guided by something bigger than yourselves? And maybe that's a little spiritual, but that's kind of where it's at. And then
you don't have to be worried. You can be spiritual.
Even if they go, it's like that going is also healing for them. It's also them exercising their agency and being like, I need somebody who's going to tell me what to do. And I think actually in my style, I will tell people what to do more than others, because I do come from a very developmentally informed lens where I'm kind of also tuning into like what age I'm dealing with. And if people are in a pretty young state, they do need more clear directives. We didn't even talk about eating disorders today.
That's crazy.
But that's crazy. And that's like an example. Like sometimes with eating disorders, people do need you to enforce a meal plan. Sometimes, not always, because they're in a very young state. And it's not like, hey, I'm curious about your spiritual journey. It's much more concrete. It's like, what structure do you need to follow through here? And I'll provide it for you.
But I'm very lost with that. I will tell you. I'm especially because
Well, eating disorders, since you work with addiction, is a really ingenious system of essentially utilizing the body as a powerful set of coping mechanisms. And it's very painful because it's kind of like being in an addictive relationship with your own body.
Right.
Where there's no space between you and the drug.
Right.
Whether it's the endorphins you're getting from restricting, or whether it's the very powerful urges to binge, or whether it's the high that you get after you binge and vomit. It's like people have learned to use their body as a set of coping skills, which is a really painful place to be because there's really no break from that.
Right. I always say that's just when it's with eating disorders, but also I think with relationship disorders or anything with like codependency or sex addiction, you're walking around with it all day. It's not going anywhere. Like drug addiction, it's not that hard. You put it down, you never look at it again. It's just hard, but it's not,
really hard. It's
hard,
all hard.
but it's all hard.
And also,
but the fact that it never gives you a break.
I hope that can help also, because I get this question a lot, like, what do you mean eating disorders? Like, don't we all have disordered eating? And yeah, like we may all have struggles in our relationship with our bodies and food. And if you've ever been with a person with an eating disorder, you're dealing with something kind of different.
It's very different.
Yeah. So it's like, it's different, and it deserves to be recognized as its own real form of actual suffering and hell. And to bring someone back from that is really sometimes nothing short of a miracle.
Wow. So let me ask you a question, because we're going to be dealing with a lot of eating disorders now, but with the men, I didn't deal with that much. I wonder if this is true. Like a lot of people say, oh, sex addiction. Is that real? Like everybody likes sex. You do it a lot.
Right.
Eating, I'll do it a lot. I have found that if they are still enjoying sex,
yeah,
they don't have sex addiction. That's a wild thing to say, but I don't think that if they see it as like, oh, I'm excited to have sex and enjoying sex, and it's not just a need. I need to do it because it needs
Not
to
just
be
compulsive.
done. Right. I don't get. You're just cheating on your wife. You know what I'm saying? Like,
You're just enjoying.
that's
Life.
not what their experience. I mean, like the way I eat, I don't call it eating disorder, but like, hey, you're eating your feelings. Like, stop going crazy like that.
Right.
But I still really am thoroughly enjoying eating. Like it's so I think I don't know if that's similar.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying, where it's like at that point you're eating as a compulsion, and all actual pleasure, like all actual enjoyable pleasure and that kind of emotional nourishment from food has been lost.
Right.
Does
that come with that?
At its extreme. Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's extreme.
Meaning, if you work in a program for eating disorders, it's like mealtime is torture for the kiddos.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eating disorders are usually, you can recognize the psychological component, where it's almost like you don't really feel like you're getting access to the actual person. Like they're extremely it's like they're far away, and they're on a repeat loop. It's just a repeat loop. It's like, in a certain way, if we're talking about anorexia, it's closest to a very painful form of OCD, where it's like you can't reason someone out of that. It's just painful to watch.
Right.
And the issue with eating, hopefully I don't know what severity of eating disorders you'll be dealing with here. You'll see. And with very severe cases of anorexia, the unique challenge is that you become your physiological state changes. So unlike other psychiatric conditions, here you're actually in a state of physiological starvation.
Right.
And very strange things start to happen because the body is wired to battle starvation. I mean, if there's one thing we're wired to do, or we have duplicate hormonal systems, it's to keep up an appetite and eat.
Right.
That's the basic survival system. So if you're thinking about what type of torture has someone been through, that they have been in a battle with their very survival system for years. So you may think of it in terms of what type of trauma are we dealing with? Like, what type of attachment wounds are we dealing with? Like, why is the person frozen in a state of self-induced starvation? Like, what is going on there? And there needs to be a component of physiological refeeding, or treatment will go absolutely nowhere. And the sad thing is, in severe anorexia, that part usually has to be kind of forced.
Right.
Because how do you get around the loop?
Is there any research on psychedelics with this? I don't know anything.
Adèle France has done some research, and there is a lot of potential because maybe one take on it from my limited perspective is, again, dissociation. To become so dissociated that you are no longer actually responding to your basic bodily cues of hunger and satiation. Psychedelics, my sense, and I think this is borne out in at least some clinical observation and research, is you can start to crack those walls. That being said, everything seems to fall short with anorexia if the person is not actually starting to eat again.
Gotcha.
And the brain is just not able to operate without food. It's like the brain is just an organ in a sense.
Right.
So I don't know what would happen. And I don't think people are really looking at this because it's probably considered dangerous to introduce psychedelics into someone who's medically underweight.
Right.
Or medically malnourished. But also to say that the majority of people with eating disorders are not medically underweight. So it's hard to assess the severity of an eating disorder on that basis alone. I did have a case of a woman who was highly intelligent, educated, and it is an interesting case because she hadn't been willing to see a mental health provider in years. So when she came to me, I don't even know how she found me, I was very open to, if she wanted medications, I was open to trying essentially anything she was motivated to explore. And she herself said, I've looked at the data on SSRIs for depression and eating disorders, and I'm not convinced. So if we ever try anything, I don't want it to be something like an SSRI.
Okay.
I want it to be something else. And we did some interesting work together, just building trust. And then eventually she came in one day and just told me her whole life story in one shot. And then the next time said, I want to try medications. So we actually ended up trying a very small dose of ketamine, oral dose, and very small. It's not really a micro dose because you feel it, but it's this very small dose. And it was like I watched her sit with herself and allow herself to release the first tear. It's like I saw her eyelash like flicker and hesitate, and then there was one tear that went down her cheek. It was like the first moment of, okay, we're here in the emotional realm. And she started to figure it out, meaning she started to recover from her eating disorder. Wow. Meaning something, I think it's what happened was it started to dissolve that dissociation for her. She was like, oh, wow, my tears are back. Okay. She had a lot of grief for very important reasons.
Right.
And honestly, she didn't even need to share it with me. It was just she started to have these sessions, let's say once a month. Low dose ketamine can be anti-dissociative because it's confusing. But yeah, it can kind of dissolve some of that guard and just allow the grief process to happen. So sometimes it's like, the way I thought about it with her in psychological terms was like the grief was up to here. There was no room for the food to go in.
Right. And
once she started to cry and experience grief, it was like, okay, there was some space to digest.
Wow. It's wild. I deal with so many things, but the eating disorders are actually something that are quite a mystery to me. And this story is wild. Okay. Okay. Where there's so much. I feel like we could sit and talk about so much other topics. Mm-hmm. But, by the way, talking about eating disorders, I don't know if I should mention this, but I am on a 2-day fast so far.
Don't tell your eating disorder therapist.
I'm on a juice fast. And my brain is doing weird stuff. I think I'm just in detox. I don't know what it is exactly. I once did 2.5 months of just juice.
This is the answer, Sonny.
What's the answer?
Your juice fast. It's the answer.
The answer to what? Being fat. That's the answer.
Yeah.
It's the answer. Mm-hmm. I needed a cleanse. I felt very unhealthy. Uh-huh. So I decided to do a juice cleanse. We'll see how long this lasts.
Let's just say for people who have a history of eating disorders, those sorts of things can reactivate that addictive pathway.
Oh.
So maybe they end up, their sobriety looks like a life of moderation, everything in moderation, including moderation.
Right.
And that might have to do with over time, the way their brain has become wired. Like it's just kind of dangerous to go into that loop-a-de-loop of restriction and starting to eliminate things and starting to starve, because then you start to feel some of those endorphins and your brain is like, ooh, I remember this and I like it. It's kind of like your very own internal drug. Not in a pathologizing way, in a way of really appreciating the pain that people with eating disorders are carrying for whatever reason and working to assimilate and integrate.
I will tell you that eating disorders and self-harm are just, I can't even conceive of them. I can't, it's so painful for me to fast. It's so painful to hurt myself that like most things I deal with, I'm like, I get it. Yeah, drugs are great. Alcohol is great. You know, bodily things like sex.
How about have you done like an ice cold plunge?
Right. I think that's self-harm.
Yeah, that's.
So I've done ice baths and I'm like, this is freezing. I don't get it. Well, I don't get it.
Oh, your body releases endogenous opioids, like
they tell me that
natural painkillers. So a lot of people get a high from it.
They love it.
Yeah.
Guys in the house are loving it. One guy in the house he's doing it because he read that it gives you a cocaine, like the same thing that cocaine gives you.
Uh-huh.
And he gets in there, he's like, "Where's the cocaine?" And it's not that high.
Yeah, it's not that high.
He's just like, it's not working. Get no cocaine high. But I don't get I don't get it.
Well, your addicts are big babies,
Yeah.
okay? So when a child has no control and they refuse to eat, drives their mother absolutely nutso, right?
Yeah.
So the power to refuse food is a power trip.
Yeah. No, I get it in my brain. I just don't get it. I just don't get it.
You don't get how someone could have the fortitude to follow through with it?
No, I did a lot of rebellious stuff as a kid. I get that. Like I want to like hurt somebody. I get that.
I want to get...
But I don't know if I would do something that would really, like, I find really uncomfortable. But I mean, I get it. I get it in my brain, but I really just don't relate. I just, I could do anything, but I don't see like any type of power trip or thrill to it for myself. That's all I'm saying. I'm not. I don't know. This is not a chiddush.
And also there are many aspects of eating disorders and the psyches that are vulnerable to them that you would relate to.
I relate to binging.
Uh-huh.
Just because I love a big bowl
But you
of
also
pasta.
relate to the pain of having no one to fall back on, meaning I feel like with eating disorders, some of the psychology is like a fierce independence of like, I will rely on absolutely nothing.
Right.
Not people, not even food. I will just do it by myself.
I do
right?
relate to that.
There you go.
Okay. Thank you. I definitely relate to that. I just try not to suffer too much along the way. But okay, I got you.
Suffering is not everyone's thrill.
It's not.
Yeah.
Whatever. I love a hot tub. To me, that's my
Nice and
independence.
nice
I love
and
a hot
soothing.
tub. I would sit in a hot tub. I don't even like saunas.
Mm-hmm.
I go with our friend Isaac. I go in the hot.
You don't like to get to that burn point?
I don't like this. Is so uncomfortable. What are
through
you
it.
guys doing?
Mhm.
You sit in a hot tub. It's nice. It's anyway. Okay, so
So
we're
to end with a punch.
end with a punch.
Yeah.
What's the punch?
The brainstorm.
Oh, I need to end with the question.
Okay.
My question is the rooftop question. What do you want to yell from the rooftop
Clearly don't
to the
listen
world?
to your podcast enough.
Not to the end. Nobody makes it to the end.
Oh my God, here we are, but this is the best part.
No, the rooftop. Yeah, I should cut out the rooftop question for
Okay.
everybody, so everybody gets to enjoy it. But what do you want to yell from the rooftop?
I want to dump out the idea of treatment-resistant patients. And I want to really humble ourselves that providers can miss things, can have blind spots and be ignorant. And I want to invite us all to humble ourselves to stay lifelong learners and stay in love with the discovery of what's possible and keep asking the hard questions and feeling the truth when it feels real and sharing that excitement and passion and love with those who need it most. I want to stay in love with the psyche and help people fall in love with their own.
That's beautiful. And the psyche's the soul.
The psyche
I'm
is
listening.
the psyche is the inner world, and at its essence is the chelek elika mimal mamish, the divine spark. It's like in Letters of Life, which is this new book of compilation of letters from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. One of them talks about how someone's struggling with some anxious thoughts, and the Rebbe is like, these symptoms are the tip of an iceberg. Freud was right when he said there's the iceberg underneath that needs tending to, but he was wrong because he said what was at the core was sexual drives.
Right.
But really we know based on the Holy Torah that what's at its core is the divine thirst. The drive that is at the core of the human being is the desire to connect with God himself, with the divine. And so it's not so hard to stay in love with the psyche when you're tapping into or working to keep tapping into that infinite reservoir. I feel like what unites us in a lot of ways is this optimism and this belief that it's okay to have an addiction, right? It's just the stuff you're looking at around you is not as amazing as the pure reservoir of water that is your divine spark. So It's like, why would you want to drink someone else's leftover Snapple? No thanks. If you could have like this pure, like from the source, like go dig your wells, you know, like do the digging. And digging your wells doesn't even have to be like a deep therapy session. It doesn't have to be a psychedelic experience. Sometimes you need those things to kickstart the digging. Like we're doing the digging in our livingness and our willingness to sit through what's uncomfortable, and not having the answers is uncomfortable. Yeah.
Wow. I just want to say that I really, really appreciate your absolute humanness in the way you approach all this. It's very rare to see someone with this level of curiosity and this level of like, I'm willing to be right or wrong or look at different things, and kind of fearless. I really, 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 really appreciate it. I don't see it a lot.
It's a messy affair, this human thing.
It is a messy affair, and it's really beautiful. I feel like when I sit with you, and every time we talk, I feel like I'm allowed to be flawed and just be able to look at this from a like a very curious, humble place, and I appreciate that. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Yeah, it's really, really good, and it was really nice. I've been wanting to have you on the pod for a long time, so
perfect timing.
It's perfect timing. Perfect. And I'm really looking forward to it because we plan on doing a lot of stuff with you with the ladies' house. The women's house. Can't call it ladies' house. You know why?
Girls.
I think you're the one who told me I call it the girls' house. And you said it's the woman's house.
These are women,
These
Sonny.
are women. And I was like, whoa. I've corrected myself 1,000 times since then. But I can't call it the ladies' house because I also realize you only call people a lady when you're driving and they're like in front of you and you're upset.
You gotta watch
Move it, lady. Sonny. We don't say lady anymore.
But I remember what you said when I corrected you. You're like, I'm just going to continue being authentically myself and saying whatever feels real. And I feel that too.
And I changed it.
And then you changed it. Yeah, this house is a very special place. And it's another vessel in the world to contain, I mean, the messiest and beautiful experience that we will, that we have ever known. And I'm just grateful to be here, grateful to every therapist along the way that has come with good care and good intentions, grateful to every lesson along the way that has been real and just open to more help. We're people seeking help in our own personal lives and paying that forward to others who need it even more.
All right. Thank you for coming.
Shkaya.
Thank you for this day that I've been given. Thank you, thank you. Thank you for this chance. Thank you for this chance to live anew.